I think the majority of people are now here. So welcome everybody to Women in Football's latest webinar. We're all really grateful to our members for your support. The feedback we've received so far from these webinars is really, really positive and has been really encouraging. We're glad you're enjoying the series. We set the webinars up in response to the COVID-19 crisis, and we hope that you are finding each event inspiring and informative, even as things start to go back to normal across the globe. We'll be carrying these out as normal, even after lockdown has been lifted. So please email events@womeninfootball.co.uk if you'd like to see a webinar on any topic in particular. So today, thank you so much to Mayi, to Joe, to Fern, to Claire for joining us. We're really excited to have you here today, and for what will be a really stimulating and engaging conversation about players' futures, next steps after playing, and figuring out what career is right for you once you're off to the pitch. So just as a start, I will intro all our panelists. So first of all, we've got our host, Joe. With nearly 20 years in the industry, Joe has experience across the board in sport, media and commercial opportunities. Starting out at the BBC as a sports reporter, she's moved into online radio and TV before joining independent agency, Something Else, and editing the flagship football show 606 for 10 years. An FA registered agent, she is passionate about securing fair contracts for all clients, be they female or male. Joe is also a director and board member of Women in Football and a trustee of both Jason Roberts and Michael Carrick Foundations. You've just had something pop up on your screen just there. Please, can you just let us know which part of the industry that you work in, just by voting on your keypads there. We've also got Mayi joining us. Mayi is a featured speaker at international conferences and events, and she's also a regular mentor, facilitator, and lecturer within educational initiatives. Her work in the sport industry includes organisations such as the IOC, World Archery, and FIFA, where she's worked for a decade as global head of women's football development. Besides her role as global head of athletes program at the Adecco Group, she's a founder of Sport Equity International Foundation and collaborates on a number of other projects. Welcome, Mayi. And then we've got Fern. Fern is a former FA Young Player of the Year, European Under-19 Player of the Tournament award winner, Senior Lioness and Women's Super League star. She has successfully managed a dual career as a professional footballer and a physiotherapist for the last 10 years, completing her master's degree in sports and injury rehabilitation in 2014 with a distinction. Fern has also developed a series of talks, workshops and seminars that are being delivered successfully in the corporate arena. She's also featured on Sky Sports, the BBC and Channel 4. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fern. And then on to Claire. Completing this awesome foursome is former Chelsea, West Ham and Lionesses defender Claire Rafferty, who represented England from the under-15s level right the way up to the senior team. Claire was Chelsea's longest serving player and has played in the World Cup, where she won a bronze in Canada in 2015. Since retiring from football, Claire has covered the 2019 Women's World Cup in France for both BBC TV and radio, and has also undertaken media work for BT Sport, Sky Sports News, Talk Sports, amongst others. Claire took up a role last July in Chelsea's commercial team as partnership sales manager. Thank you so much for joining us, Claire. I'll now hand you over to Joe.
Thanks, Lungi. Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know it's really sunny, so well done for logging on at 11 AM on a Monday. Just to tell you a bit about format. So we're going to talk for about an hour. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to put questions to us. I can see some of you popping up on the chat. So please do introduce yourself, just say hi, where you're from. It's really good for us to see who's here, and just for you to talk amongst each other. So definitely introduce yourselves on the chat, and any questions, Cassie's going to keep across those and I'll keep across those. So anything you want to ask the panelists, do just put in the chat. I don't have to say this, I'm sure, but let's keep it positive, respectful and polite. This is a safe space for our Women in Football members. We've had some great webinars, and it's just a great place for you all to meet each other and learn from our experienced panelists. So we're all going to talk a bit about how COVID-19 has affected us in our work and football lives. And then we're going to look, I mean, I don't know about you all, but I've certainly spent a lot of time the last 3 months kind of thinking about myself, my future, what I do, why I do it more specifically. And I'm sure lots of you are in the same boat. And I think it's been a really interesting time, especially for players, And, you know, those of us that work with and around players, I think nobody's ever had that much time where they haven't had to get up, go training, be told what to do, work towards the Saturday or the Sunday match day. So I think all of us have had to take a bit of a step back and go, okay, what's all this about? What are we doing? And hopefully in the next 45 minutes to an hour, we can explore that a bit and give some practical advice, whether you are a player who's thinking about what to do next or whether you're working in the industry. I think for those of us that work in the industry, we all have a responsibility to help our players and help the football industry. So do you want to start with you, Fern? I think you've had quite an interesting, we've had an interesting season, but an interesting 3 months. And just tell us a bit about how this time's been for you.
Yeah, so I found out what a weekend was. I think to start off with, yeah, it's been a bit strange. I went into lockdown. It was kind of the last day of training, and then we found out we were going into lockdown, and that was my first day back on the pitch after an ankle injury. So I had ankle reconstruction in December, so it was kind of, I was just about ready to get back into training, and being in and around all the girls. That was great because I'd spent the last 6 months in the gym, and then all of a sudden it was kind of cut, as you say, everyone's been through the same thing, but it was just a bit strange because I was kind of ready to go back out there and play. So we obviously followed the training programs for however long it was, 4 or 5 weeks, and then it got to the point where it was going to be, okay, well, that's it now. You aren't actually coming back in. So lockdown for me has been a little bit of a strange one because I've kind of been deciding what my next steps are going to be and what it's going to look like going forward, because I was kind of ready to tail off and transition into maybe going into the working environment, things like that. So it's just given me a little bit more time to kind of think about what I'm going to do next. I've set up my own kind of website and business going forward, doing some kind of keynote speaking and things like that. So as much as it was a bit strange to start off with, it's actually been quite productive over the last couple of weeks/months in talking to different people, what I'm going to do going forward. So yeah, it's given me a little bit more time to think, I suppose, which maybe isn't a good thing sometimes, but I suppose it's better than not having any time at all.
Yeah, I think it's been a process, certainly, hasn't it? I don't know. It kind of feels like there's been waves, and there's periods where you feel very productive and really on top of things. And then I think there's periods where you just go, what is this? What's this all about? And we'll put your website in the chat, Cassie or I, or make sure we share your website. So yeah, you'll all have that. So Claire, this time last year was, you know, very good for you.
Yeah, I guess this moment last year, I was all these kind of memories popping up on social media of obviously retiring and actually having the moment to step back. I realised I kept myself busy for the whole year because probably it was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be retiring. Went straight into the commercial team at Chelsea. And these 3 months has obviously been transformative in the way that we approach people, because outreaching for new partners, you know, we normally are inviting people to games, we're going to meeting, flying around the world, trying to create relationships, and that's just impossible now. So I think taking a step back and analysing the kind of strategy of how we do things, and I think also on a personal level, you know, what am I doing, what am I adding value to, what do I want to do this? I think there's been so much reflection, and we've spoken about it, haven't we, quite a bit. Actual retiring from football is such a big emotional step, and it's quite funny that Fern's on this call because we've had a chat a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, Fern? Yeah. And I think the retirement decision is such a big one, and facing up to it and kind of weighing up the pros and cons about who you are now moving forward, that's been the biggest how long has it been in this lockdown now? Three months, is it?
3 months.
I feel like this 3 months has almost like changed my whole mindset, so I'm quite grateful for it.
Wow. And we'll pick up on a lot of those things you said, because I think it is really interesting that you're obviously a year ahead of Fern almost. Yeah. And I think there's lots of things, like you say, you retired and you just went and you almost just continue in that footballer mindset of get up, work, train, do something, and you don't think. And then maybe now a year on, like you say, you've had that 3 month time to kind of process what's happened. So we'll definitely come back to that. Mayi, how's it been for you and your business? Because obviously a lot of us met you, I think it was Christmas time in the new year, and we had a physical conference together. So how's it impacted your business?
Well, I think it's starting from the personal perspective. I think it's kind of we have to stop in a hurry. So it's a moment of like self-reflection, and then, you know, what what can we do with this, you know, opportunity, if we can reframe things. And I think it's starting from that personal moment. It has a huge impact also from the business perspective, because everything suddenly has to become digital, and you have to keep connecting with people. You have to keep on going with your strategy, with the partnerships that we have, but everything turns digital. So we've been working really a lot on developing a more digital model for athletes on career transition. And we are really excited because towards autumn this year, we are hoping to launch a portal where we will have all career resources for athletes inside that portal. So athletes will be able to register and kind of go into a journey of career transition that will give them those resources digitally. But also we are looking into even greater models to connect athletes with companies and athlete-friendly employers. So from the business perspective, it also gives us the opportunity to think, okay, we need to be more digital, and to be able to scale and support more athletes, we need to really create those resources online. So I'm really excited about, you know, this moment in time and the opportunity that has given us to reflect personally, but also from the business perspective. And I think it reflects what, you know, Fern and Claire have said as well. So it's great that we all took this in a reframed way.
Just, I mean, a lot of people might not know this, but you were an Olympic athlete. So in terms of that training mindset, how would, you know, I'm talking about the mental health aspect here, how would you have found it if suddenly for 3 months you hadn't been able to go to training with teammates, or maybe not even been able to use gyms or open spaces?
I think for an athlete, this is, from the athlete perspective, this could be one of the most challenging moments. It's like, especially athletes were going into the Olympic Games this summer, and then suddenly the Olympic Games are postponed. I think it was a reality that no one was prepared for. So suddenly you need to adapt everything to being away, to not being able to compete, but also to not be able to connect with your teammates, with your coaches, with the rest of your team and your entourage. So the challenge posed by athletes is significant. But at the same time, I think a lot of the athletes, what we have seen is that they've come up with new ways to connect with fans, with new ways to actually train from home. And just speaking also with some coaches, the idea of reinventing the way to keep athletes active, to keep them also on the training path that they need to then reach the games in the next year. So I think from the athlete perspective, it's incredibly challenging, but it's how the athlete mindset and that resilience that tell us, okay, this is a challenge moment. How can we bounce back? How can we actually leave from this moment and you know, come back stronger? And I think that's one of the great qualities that athletes have, actually. So coming back from a moment like this and keep going. So I think from the athlete perspective, you prove that possibility and that quality that we have.
No, I think that's some really good points. It's interesting you saying that about, I was just thinking back, like 3 months feels a long time ago. And I remember the first 2 weeks of lockdown, I spent about a week trying to find some gym equipment for my clients, as in the players, phoning around Peloton bikes and gyms saying, please, can you send some gym equipment to my players? Because obviously we didn't know when the season was coming back. So we had to keep the fitness up. And the clubs obviously hadn't got their head, they'd sent out the training schedules, but obviously most of the women in particular didn't have gym equipment. It was different for the men. But yeah, it feels like that 3 months ago, like you say, that the original panic of, how am I going to train? How do I do this? And then now I think the sort of the middle bit and the bit now is more about the mental health aspect of it and how we can support that. So let's sort of go back to the situation for players as it stands. I mean, Raf, as I said, you're kind of a year into it. Fern, you're probably at that crossroads. Raf, what is life like after playing? How did you find the transition, and what advice would you give to Fern, I guess?
Yeah, I guess for me, it was a decision that I made with a clear head at the time. But I think from a young age, I think having always worked because this time was coming and having had so many injuries, I knew I probably would have to retire a little bit earlier. Actually playing and realising that I actually was getting beaten by someone who I shouldn't be beaten by, I never used to be. That in itself was a sign for me to go, you know what, this is it now. But then going straight into another role without taking a moment to reflect on my whole life changing, I didn't appreciate how powerful that would have been, and something that I wish I had done. But I think it's such an emotional roller coaster, the lack of control that you have sometimes in football, because the opinion is never, you can't control someone's opinion of you, and obviously we all know football is opinion based. So I think I wanted to take that control back, and the reflection element I should have done. Moving forward, I was just so busy, threw myself straight into learning a new role. It's crazy because I must have been so zoned into just going again and again every single day and being so busy that I didn't really appreciate what I was doing. And I think halfway through I did realise I felt a little bit kind of not insecure, but almost like an imposter role. I was in this environment where people have been working for years and years, and I'd earned my place there, but I hadn't really zoned into what my attributes were and what my worth was in that role, because I was so conscious of how good everyone else was, or how I didn't know this or this or this. So I think when we move forward and talk about the actual attributes that athletes have, the big key that I wish I would have done is zone into them at the beginning, and try to kind of leverage them more so than thinking about what I wasn't good at. I don't know if I answered the question then. I went off in about 5 different
that's I think, you know, from someone who works very closely with you, I think you've kind of explained that really well. I think you went into this, right, I've got this job and I'm going to do this, and you just literally powered on through. And, you know, we obviously checked in with each other regularly, and I'm loving it. I'm quite tired, but, you know, it's hard. We knew that would happen, you know, that's life. But I think emotionally, it probably wasn't until Christmas, maybe New Year, where we both went, right, how you actually, it is, it's, you know, you're on this sort of treadmill, aren't you? And now it's kind of, like you say, you've had to reflect on, okay, how do I cope with this? What level I do belong, I do know what I'm doing, I'm actually going to be very good at this, and I'm going to. I think
the key thing is the identity as well. You suddenly, one thing that I've realised was kind of was hurting me a little bit when people was going, oh, ex-footballer, or you're not that anymore, then who are you now? Like, that identity is then removed. And a part of me went, well, maybe I shouldn't have gone and worked for a football club. Maybe I should have done something totally different. So then I don't have that connection. So there was quite a lot of kind of thought process going in. But yeah, grateful for this 3 months, to be fair, to be able to, you know, really zone into who I am.
Yeah, and I think, Mayi, we'll pick up on the, specifically the attributes, and then also the identity, definitely. And Fern, where are you at? Where's your, you know, what are you thinking about life after playing, and how that might look for you?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of it being like a real crossroads at the moment, and like what Claire was saying about the control thing completely being out of your control. I think that's the hardest thing about it when you come to kind of looking towards transition and stuff. You want it to be on your terms, like when you do it, and you know, you want to feel comfortable with it, you want to feel happy, like as Claire was saying, with the decision that you've made. You want to be confident in that that's your decision going forward. And I think, you know, coming towards the end of the season, I suppose I'd be honest and say I was ready to move on to the next kind of steps in terms of looking more towards physio-based stuff, more doing a little bit something different. And I was kind of happy with that, especially with the career I've had in terms of injury as well. As you say, it's not been so smooth in terms of that road. So that was kind of the control aspect has always been gone in terms of football for me. So it's like, I want to play, but I can't. I want to play, but I can't. So now it's kind of like, I want that control in my ending as such, in terms of football. And again, that's being taken out of my hands with obviously COVID and what's happened. So, you know, no one really wants to finish playing on being like, well, it just stopped randomly. You want to kind of have your bye to your family, all that kind of stuff. You want people to see you play. So I think where I'm at the moment is, you know, I spoke to Claire not so long ago about how she felt going forward, and actually it was a really good chat to have, because I think at some point the decision's going to have to be made to take that next transition into putting more into my career as such. And especially like what you just said about, you know, going into the big wide world of jobs and stuff and not knowing if you belong there because you're so comfortable in the footballing aspect as well. So you know, even just applying for jobs, like I know I've got the qualifications, I know I've got the degrees and things like that, but then at the same time it's like, have I got the experience in that world that everybody else, and will they look at me as, oh, you haven't quite got the, you know, you haven't worked full time in this role, so we're not going to take you on and stuff. So it's just having the confidence to be able to completely switch into a different world. And I think, you know, I don't think if it wasn't going to be playing football, because I think I am looking at potentially playing part-time, but that's still in the back of my mind. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to have to stop at some point. Is it better to do it sooner rather than later? So yeah, it's all a bit of a crossroads. So I'm just trying to find out, you know, what it feels like for me. I literally change on a daily basis. One day I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play next season. One day I'm like, no, I'm going to focus on my career and things. So it's just, I took a little bit of time out. It's good to let me really come to think about what it's going to look like going forward.
And in terms of support, I know you two have had a conversation, and that might have happened organically, but in terms of support, I mean, who do you have these conversations with? Raf, like, I mean, I kind of know, but who did you?
Yeah.
Who's there to support you, and who could Fern look to now?
I guess at the time I was fortunate when I was at West Ham in that last season, Matt Beard, I had an ongoing conversation with him the whole year, just because when I signed, I was honest with, I didn't know how long I wanted to continue for. And that's just because I had a personal relationship with him, you know, over the last 15 years. So I was fortunate to have that. I think actually at the same time, it's something that you don't want to expose to too many people, because if you say that you might want to stop and then you don't want to give, it's almost a control thing. Yeah, you don't want to give someone a reason to not sign you on, or are you not fully committed to this? So there is kind of, you have to keep it. I felt like I had to keep it quite close. I think I don't really think I discussed it with too many people other than the people it was going to directly affect, as in, you know, football, and then outreaching for jobs. In my own head, I almost didn't want anyone else's opinion. And even my mum was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, I don't need your opinion, because I know that you love coming to watch me and you've got any emotional attachment. So I need to move on now, and I don't really. Yeah, I probably should have outreached to a few more people, but I had to quite stubborn with it. I had to make the decision by myself, I think.
Yeah.
Fern, how have you found it? Have you found that there's been enough people you can discuss it with, or any sort of, I mean, obviously Raf's been there as a support, but is there anyone else that?
I think I'm probably the same, to be honest. I think this is probably the first time I've spoke to more people about it and gone, that is actually potentially an option. I think a lot of people over the last couple of weeks been like, so what are you going to do now? What are you going to do? And I'm a bit like, don't want to tell you, don't want to say anything, because it's, again, it kind of exposes you a little bit to them being like, oh, so you're actually thinking about stopping playing, there must be something drastically wrong. And it's not that that's the case. It's more just that at some point, like, your career and like the next steps have got to come first. And it's kind of, for me, trying to figure out if that's the time now. So yeah, I think at club wise, I've only really spoken to, you know, Hope about it, and like, we were under the understanding that this was potentially going to be the last year and things like that. So we had that conversation, and you know, her door had always been open to go and have a chat to if I wanted to and things like that. And then apart from that, yeah, it's really just been family, to be honest. I've not really spoken to anyone, because it's kind of something, I don't know whether it's an shame thing or what, I don't really know, but it's kind of, you just don't want to talk about it. It's kind of like the elephant in the room, and you know, the look on someone's face when you say you might do it, sometimes it's a bit of disappointment, and it kind of is like, oh, really? As if to say you've got nothing else to give, which is, it's obviously not the case, but it makes you feel like that sometimes.
I think it comes back to that identity thing, doesn't it? And Raf's kind of alluded to it, that everybody associates you with, well, you're the footballer. And what do you mean it's going to end? Like, and the same with yourself. The minute you verbalise it's a reality, and someone might pull you up on it. So rather than just being able to speak about it safely and being honest, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's interesting in any career that we rarely talk about our next job, because you feel a sense of disloyalty, or a sense of, like you say, like someone thinks I'm not focusing on the job I'm in. But we're all humans, and it's human nature to go, well, what's my 10-year plan? Yeah. And I think it's so different in football, in that you often maybe don't write that 10-year plan. You kind of write the season to season plan. Mayi, I've seen you've been kind of nodding along to lots of this. What have you made of what Fern and Claire have said?
Yeah, no, I think it really reflects a lot of the reality of many athletes and, you know, players that are going through this moment of transition. And the first advice that should be given to athletes in general, especially when they're younger, is to think about career transition the earliest as possible. This is the best way. And I think it's what Fern said is quite a strong feeling for many athletes, is that elephant in the room you don't want to talk about. But it's actually quite important to start thinking about it the younger you are and further away from that particular moment. And on that, I think I always reflect on something that was really impressive when Abby Wambach retired. She said, experts call it career transition. I call it terrifying. One of the most successful players of all times. Actually, at the exit door, she was terrified on what was coming next. And what is really important, because this identity is very close to us. So we are athletes, what's next? What is coming after? Am I gonna become a doctor? Am I gonna become a scientist? Am I gonna become a coach? But if those questions are asked earlier, then it's easier to go through those career transitions. But nevertheless, no matter where you are at that moment, what is really important, and Claire was saying, is who you are. That's the first point of check-in. Self-awareness is really the cornerstone of development for all of us. No matter where you are in life, the more you know about yourself, the more you know about your learning edges. What are the things that are important for you? What are your personality traits that make you really strong in certain things? This is really important. If you know about that, and if you know where you need to continue learning and developing, then you can jump to the next one. And Fern was mentioning, for example, skills. I don't have experience maybe in the labor market, but what are my skills? What are my attributes? What are the things I have learned? And that's the second step that is really important on career transition. First of all, is really to understand what are your values. What is absolutely not negotiable for you, and that will define the type of industry you want to go for, or the type of job, or the type of company you want to work for. So there are certain things that are simply non-negotiable and will be really important in your career, so you'll be happy. And the other thing is your skills. And I think athletes have such an amazing number of attributes in their toolkit. It's really important to then make sure that they know about it. And so beyond teamwork and leadership development, which are really high top leadership skills for athletes, there are other things that labor market is looking for. And at the Adecco Group, we developed this framework of key 8 attributes, and starts from being analysts. Athletes are analysts by nature. You need to analyze yourself against your competitors. And you need to understand the whole holistic of your sports to be able to compete and to be able to win, to be able to give you an edge. And then you also, athletes are resilient. Resilient is one of the top skills and attributes stuff today in the labor market, that ability to bounce back. Athletes are creative thinkers. Imagine, no matter what position in football you are, you have to constantly read the game and be creative to react. So if you apply that into the business world, 3/4 of CEOs are looking for creative people. So all of these things add to amazing attributes that you have in your toolkit, but you need to make sure you know them, and you need to make sure that you actually can translate that into business language. So this research, I believe Cassie is gonna share it after the webinar, so I won't go into that. The third thing that is really important in career transition is where your fire lies. Where is your passion? What makes you wake up in the morning? And you definitely wanna connect with that. And passion comes from your darkest moments in life and those moments where you are prouder, those winning moments. So if you can connect with that passion, you will be able to get up in the morning and keep searching. What do I want to do next? But then with that fire inside, and then connect with your purpose. And why it's so important? No matter which industry you go, what job you do, you need to define what your purpose is, because your decisions. Claire was saying, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want anyone to influence my decision, because you got your North Star, you got your big why, and whatever decision you make in life, if that is clear for you, then it doesn't matter that people don't understand it. You will be able to speak to that and continue. And I think that will help you to make impact in a wider sense. And at the end of the day, our careers, our life are meaningful when we can make impact. when we can help other people. And that, I think, as athletes, you bring so much to the world already, because fans, everyone see, you know, when you play, when you win, when you lose, you are having impact already on people. But in your career, you want to continue having that, and you want to harness that. So those three things, I would say those three steps: self-awareness, your values, your skills, your toolkit, define your career interests, and then connect your passion and purpose to make impact. It's kind of a formula that is kind of 100% going to work for you.
Yeah, and as you said, I mean, there's so Adecco have done this 8 attributes toolkit, and we will be sharing it with everybody, because I think whatever stage you're at, and actually whatever job you're doing, I mean, I found it, Mayi shared it with me last week, and I found it incredible, just to help you assess yourself. And it's exactly that. It's once you know, if you know who you are, and you know what your values are, and you know what starts your fire, you know, I'm not going to say you're invincible, but you pretty much are invincible. What do you two think that the football industry can do more to support you? I mean, because I would say, in my role as an agent, I would say start thinking about it early. So, for example, Raf, I think we've worked together 8 years, 10 years, and, you know, it was always a kind of long-term plan. And, you know, like Michael Carrick, who only retired last year again, I've been working with him for 10 years, because 10 years ago, you know, a lot of my clients came to me and said, I'm thinking what happens next, you know, what's my bigger plan? What do I need to do now? But what else can the football industry do? Rafa, maybe start with you on that.
I think actually is a little bit of ownership from the players themselves, and I think that's an attribute of a player, got accountability. If you don't want to invest in yourself in the future, someone can't force you to, but it's about the education of maybe, you know, the likes of me and Fern expressing to them how important that is. I think getting into the clubs and bringing it to their attention. I speak to a lot of the Chelsea lot, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing next? And the reaction is, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to know. I was like, well, you do, because I tell you what, I invested my whole career working in the investment bank, and I still feel this way. So if you are not starting now, think about how you might potentially feel. So I think the clubs have a responsibility. The PFA, obviously, they offer training courses and stuff, but I do think it does lay with yourself. I think it's in particular with the way women's football is going, I feel quite fortunate that I was probably from an era that went from part-time to full-time, because then I had to work. So I was forced to you know, gain them employability skills. But this new generation coming through, we're in this bubble, and they get, you know, breakfast, dinner, get the bills paid for. That it's kind of a non-reality that they live in, so they don't have to face up to what's next, unless they want to. So I think the education is important. Seeing people almost struggle themselves, you know, actually bringing it to life. I mean, I don't really know what else. I guess it is just the investment in themselves.
Yeah, I can see in the chat that there's some questions coming up, and Stuart Barker did ask that. He said, what support do the PFA give? Because obviously I think we seem to do a lot for the men, but is everything open to you from the PFA?
The PFA, I don't know about the leagues below, but we do have a representative who comes in every single year and educates us about what you can do and what the choices are. But I think it is just about knowing how they can help. And in the women's side of it, fortunate enough, you know, me and Fern fortunate enough to play in the, you know, WSL 1, I think lower down, that's when they don't really have the visibility of how they can help. But then it does go back to going, you know, I have to reach out to them as well. There's only so much they can tell me about how they can help. And obviously mental health aspect side, they do offer, you know, one-to-one coaches and stuff. So I think clubs need to take a little bit more responsibility for me, I think, as well.
Okay.
I think.
And what do you think the football industry could do?
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree on that point, to be honest, because I think, you know, it's coming into like the latter part of the years, you've got like, if you look at like the Lionesses and stuff, they'll have transition programs now to kind of help the players and things. And yes, obviously you do have to do it yourself. I think I went to, well, obviously a player transition with Adecco and Mayi in December. And to be honest, that was probably not too late, because I say you've done it for like 10 years. I did my physiotherapy course years ago, knowing that at some point I'd need to retire, but it was always in the background for me. It was kind of like, well, I'll touch that base when I come to it. Whereas going on that course in December, it really did open my eyes a little bit to that I do have a lot of attributes, a lot to give. But it was more like, how do I even find a way into these kind of pathways? And, you know, even just getting a CV sorted, that was a big help, just doing that, and, you know, sorting out my LinkedIn, things like that I didn't even think was going to be important. That course taught me to do that. But then, you know, looking at where it lies within the clubs, there's not a lot. It's kind of, you finish and you're done, unless you've got something really to offer. And a lot of the time you have to be a coach to do that. You know, I think Man City have done it recently. Obviously Jill's potentially signed a contract as a coach, potentially trying to help her transition maybe in the future, which I think is great. But I think, you know, more clubs could potentially offer something in terms of how they're going to implement players in and around there, because yes, you want more coaches in football, but there's a lot that other players have to offer. What if you're not a coach? What if you're a physio? What if you're a psychologist? What if what if you don't specifically want to be in that coaching role? So I think they could offer a little bit more in that sense. I think I asked the question and it was like, well, what do the clubs do? What can they provide? And it was like, well, we've got a transition pathway for the men, but there's nothing for the women. And I was flabbergasted, to be honest. I was like, right, okay, well, that doesn't seem right in this day and age in top flight football, that you can only offer something to a male but not to a female. And the answer I got was, well, it's budgets. We don't have the budget. We don't have the budget to provide that role for you, or even to provide that experience for you, to let you, you know, find your pathway through. So I suppose that sense is quite disappointing. They could do more from that sense. But, you know, that was then on me. And after having that conversation in September, I think it was last year, to go, okay, well, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to have to do it myself. So yeah, it was, I'll go on these courses, I'll go and get more information, I'll go and get more education to how I can do things when I eventually stop playing. So it does fall back on yourself sometimes, but maybe it shouldn't do as much.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way process, isn't it? I think the football industry has a responsibility to you, and you have a responsibility to yourself. Sorry, Mayi, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in because I think what both Claire and Fern have said is so important. You know, having this really well-established career transition programs at the club level and at the federation level is so important for the athletes, and it's something that is on to them. They give so much time to train, they give so much time to the sports. And actually, especially for women and women athletes and women players, you find that, you know, they sacrifice a lot of time on their studies and their work experience actually to be able to play because of the conditions of playing in general. So this should be part of the offer, a standard offer for players at the club level. And I think we need to educate the younger athletes and especially younger women athletes. We need to educate them on this importance, and also whenever they are signing contracts, that this is part of the standard benefits that they should have, you know, career transition trainings, but also opportunities to have work experience. All of these things are so important. Financial literacy. If you think about how important it is for women and girls today to be able to manage their finances, just to think about, you know, how could I invest a little amount of money to actually have been able to pay my studies after I finish my career or during my career. All of these things are really important, and this should be part of a standard. So I think in general, the football industry and the sport industry owns this to the athletes, and it should be really standard. I think also from the industry perspective, in particular when it comes to players, we need to have, and this is something in the context of women in football is so important, of what women in football are doing, is to really have role models and to really have more women in this industry to actually tell the players, you could actually come in and, you know, be someone leading. It's not only about being a coach, like Fern was saying, but there are other so many great roles that you could play in this industry. And I think that should reflect for players to see themselves also in a really great career path in the industry. So we need to have more women, or we need to have more players in the industry. And what is really sad is that in general in sports, you get women athletes that leave the sport industry and go and work for Fortune 500 companies because they have more opportunities. Top women that are in Fortune 500 companies are former athletes, but they leave the industry because they don't see the opportunity. So I think that's something that the football industry needs to do very, very strongly, because the talent that they are, you know, letting go away is really costing the business. So I think it's important in this context to highlight that too, and the need for more role modeling and the need for making a career path in the football industry more appealing for players after their playing careers.
No, I agree entirely. And that's why, you know, thank you again to Raf for doing this, because I think what you've done in the last year is incredible. And the job that you have, I know you don't like shouting about yourself, but actually the role you're doing at Chelsea, it's a big role. And I think it's such a good example to other young players coming through. And I actually thought it was really interesting what you said about the fact that you had worked in an investment bank throughout your career because you had to. And I think you're right. I mean, I am concerned about the next generation of players in terms that they're not earning money that they can retire on, yet they're full-time footballers, so they don't have time to invest in their career. And we are going to get to this point, I think, in kind of 5 or 10 years where we have this kind of surplus of retired female footballers who maybe don't have a skill set or don't know where their skill set lies. So on that, we've established, okay, this is the issue. This is where we're at. You know, how do we know our identity? How do we know what we're good at? Mayi, coming back to you on that, what are the key skills that you think footballers bring to the labour market?
I think, I mean, if we can go back to that, the framework that the Adecco Group developed, starting from, you know, in today's world, companies want to stay ahead of the game. And one of the key things is being disruptive. So to disrupt markets, to disrupt the industry, companies need disruptive people that challenge the status quo. And I think that's also one of the key attributes that you bring as an athlete, being a positive disruptor, coming in and challenge the status quo in companies. The other thing that is great is that athletes are amazing persuasive communicators. You need to communicate with fans, you need to communicate with your team, you need to be able to, negotiate in that process of, communicating with your team, communicating with everyone. So I think this is essential. Communication skills are essential in the labor market today, and companies are looking for these kind of skills too. But also athletes have business acumen. Don't underestimate the amount of learning experience you do in the process of being kind of a business entity yourself. You have to somehow sell yourself. You have to create your own brand. You have to look for sponsorship. So somehow you develop a good basics when it comes to business mindset. And this you bring also into the labor market. The creativity I mentioned earlier. Athletes are also publicists. How much you have to promote in today's world on social media, how much you have to talk and connect with fans. So all of the things you are bringing in, so really don't underestimate, you've got a lot of experience in all of these aspects, and the labor market is looking for them. But then also, if we look more specifically, and I think the COVID-19 makes the world change in a hurry, right? We need to be also more specific when it comes to skills in the labor market, and when it comes to what we could develop further from that toolkit we have. For example, one of the key skills that are being looked at, and more specifically when it comes to hard skills, is customer service skills. How you interact with customers, how you work with people. Athletes are amazing at that too, so this is a great opportunity for them to connect. There is also the soft skills and the emotional intelligence part, the ability to not crack under pressure. This is really important. I mean, COVID-19 challenged all of us. And look at athletes, how they reacted. We were talking about the postponement of the games, cancellation of competitions, no leagues, no games. So immediately reframing that into an opportunity and not cracking and being emotionally intelligent to really develop from that, I think is something that athletes have, and the labor market is really looking. The digital skills, and I think here we need to pay a lot of attention, because connecting remotely with people will be so important as we move on. The new norm is going to be that we're going to work maybe half remotely, half in person. We need to think about that. So those things athletes are able to develop and learn really fast as well. And then I think one of the major takeaways to think about a mix of all of those skills. A mix of your toolkit as an athlete and those things that are demanded in the labor market. And as you move into a new career, as you do your career transition, maybe think about some aspects of career and work that you never thought before. For example, digital marketing, coding, all these STEM skills, science, technology, math, you might find that you have a talent on that. And these are high demand as well. So again, it's that combination of your skills and attributes as an athlete and looking what are companies and what is the labor market looking for. And in this opportunity to jump into a new identity or sliding into a new career, what are the great things that you could do from that foundation that you have?
Raf, not to put you on the spot, but if you were, so say we were this time last year, and you were applying for a role or you're about to go for a job interview, what are maybe like the three main things, the three main attributes that you think you have from being an athlete that you've used in the last year?
Well, firstly, I wish I'd had, you know, the inside Mayi was just saying, could explain all that. It does contextualize it in your own head and you can zone into who you are. But I think I probably didn't realize half of them at the time. The main one I kind of fall back on is the accountability and the self-reflection and the instant feedback. And I guess maybe that links into the disruptiveness and we're so reliant on people going, oh, that wasn't good enough, that was good enough. And then you then self-reflect and go, well, how could I have done it differently? I think that's something that I like to use a lot. And it's quite uncomfortable in a working environment. So I've tried not to tone it down too much because being that direct in a situation where people aren't used to it, it's been a bit of a learning curve, but I've craved it as well myself. So I think that accountability, the emotional intelligence for me was a big one. Obviously having to deal with so many different personalities, learning how to speak to people differently, learning, you know, what gets the best out of them, and just managing the ups and downs of it. I think that emotional intelligence. And the third one, I guess the problem solving, but I don't know how I've used that as much at the moment, but then every single day you do use it, don't you? Especially in this situation. I think problem solving as in, you know, what does this, you know, new partner want? What can I get the best out of them? We can't do this at the moment. How can we, you know, try and solve the situation to adapt to what they want? How can we align properly? So yeah, I guess they're the three for me, which kind of stand out the most.
Yeah, I think that's I think, and that adaptability, what you were, you know, that last thing is you're so used to, because you're adapting every day to new formations, who you're playing against that week, new managers, new teammates. I think, and it's, you know, Mayi said, referred to it as kind of the resilience, but it's resilience / adaptability that just comes naturally to you guys, and you may not realize it. I think what you said there about feedback's really interesting, because when I first started working with players, especially on the media side, and they'd do a show, or they'd come on Match of the Day, or they'd come on 606, and afterwards they'd want about 2-hour debrief about their performance. And I'd be like, yeah, it was fine, you could have done a bit of that. And they'd be like, no, but tell me how it is. And it's really weird because of, you know, kind of egos in the industry. Sometimes you're not as blunt with feedback, and I'm quite blunt. But I think working with players was really interesting because they really want you to tell it as it is. And I think, you know, you are all very strong and you do take feedback very well. And actually, like you say, sometimes it's hard for you because I think managers don't always have the time to give you feedback every day about your performance that day in the workplace. Whereas obviously on a pitch, you have the Monday meeting and we sit there and we analyse your performance for 3 hours. Well, we don't have that time in working life to do that. So I think that's really interesting for me to hear. Right, we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes, so I'm just flicking through some questions. One for Fern. Fern from Stuart. It seems many female players from the WSL have retired from football as opposed to dropping down. Why do you think that is?
I can say personally for me, the dropping down thing hasn't always been looked at as an option, more because of that career aspect as well, because at the end of the day, you need money. If you're in the men's leagues and you drop down to the championship, you can still survive off that kind of income as well. Whereas for me, if you're dropping down from the WSL to the championship, you are then effectively going into a part-time league. So, you know, people need that salary and that security. And again, it's more about the next steps of your career. Unfortunately, you can't just retire as a female footballer and just completely stop. And, you know, have a year or two out to think about what it is you might want to go into. You kind of have to just hit the ground running, and potentially figure out what your next avenue is going to be pretty soon, really. You know, I've gone from being salaried the last however many years to now actually I'm self-employed, and everything I do, the money, it has to come in and I have to work hard for it. So, you know, yes, it might be a bit of a buffer in terms of that, but I think it's got to be a point where you have to focus on what your future is going to look like and what your career pathway is going to be. I did drop down a couple of years ago into the WSL2, to then get back into WSL1. I think that's, for me, having played at that top level for most of my career, it's always been about trying to play at the top level as long as I can. And I think if I was to drop down, I'd want to be able to be in a team that I could then potentially get back up into that next level as well. So there's a couple of different reasons personally for me why it will more be about straight into retirement rather than part-time. But as I say, everybody's different. That would be my personal reason.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for everyone. It's that, do I want to go out on the top level and in the Prem, or actually do I love football that much that actually it's better for my soul and it's better for me that I keep playing, even though it might be slightly more frustrating in the Championship maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen a lot of players do it because, again, they've got that love of the game is still there for them. I think if you asked a couple of players, potentially like me, like Raf, obviously we've gone through a lot of injuries and a lot of setbacks in our career. So it's kind of like, as you go through that, the further you go on, the more you start to lose your love of the game. And I think once that love of the game is lost, it's hard to get that back a little bit. So, you know, for me, it was kind of, well, if I drop down, will I then get my love of the game back? But again, are you always searching for something that you might have lost along the way a little bit because you've had to continually fight to be able to do what it is that you love to do? So that's another reason for me potentially maybe not carrying on, because am I going to be searching for something that might never come back?
Yeah, I think it's about what Mayi says about what's your fire, and that is completely individual, isn't it? So Raf could say, oh, well, you know, I retired when I was at West Ham because I wanted to go out with a cup final and of the Prem. And actually my fire is now exploring another part of my career. But you might say my fire is a Saturday or a Sunday and Tuesdays and Thursdays training. And that's what I need to get me through the week. So I think on that, it's so individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just picking up on one of your points, which I think is something we never really discuss. And I don't know if you guys discuss it amongst yourselves, but on the finance point, so you said obviously you're a contracted player and you're contracted, so players who have contracts running till the 30th of June. And then lots of players, especially in this climate, will find that on the 1st of July, they don't have a job, basically. They don't have an income. Yeah. Do you discuss it, or is there this, because I feel that there's this pretense, and I kind of do it to protect maybe players or protect women's football per se, that, well, we're professional footballers, so we have standards and we have a certain standard of living and we're okay. But actually that's quite a lot of pressure, isn't it? That we only really deal in 1-year contracts often. Yeah. And like you say, lots of players on the 30th of June are not going to have an income in July. Do you talk about that?
No, to be honest, it's not something that you actually ever, no one really addresses it. And again, I think it's like a bit of a pride thing, you know. I've got my money coming in, and actually it's me sitting down and being honest with myself that actually, you know, I'm going to take a massive hit this year in terms of that salaried income. And it was only recently after talking to another manager in WSL, it was like, well, you're entitled to, 1 month's pay after you finish, and then that's it, pretty much. You've got your 1 month, and then you've got that month essentially to go and find yourself work. And it's, you know, it's happened to me before. It happened at Notts County when we got liquidated. It was literally, again, that was it. Your money just stopped the next week. And it's just so raw that it can happen so bluntly and so quickly. But again, that's like anybody else being made redundant. You kind of have to then, you just go out and you go and try and find your next step, really, and try and find out where your next paycheck's going to come from. And it's it can be quite a scary thought, I think. And that's what a lot of players, especially now, are going through, because there's so many that have been released from clubs. Yeah.
And is there anything you think we as an industry, we as women in football, we as the PFA, we as a Deco, because I think it's something that we never discuss. I mean, I discuss it obviously individually with my clients, but as a industry as a whole, I don't think we are very open about the financial side of it. Do you think there's any, you know, or what could we do? help that maybe?
I think it's maybe just being open to have the conversation about it a little bit as well, because it's such a taboo topic that nobody really wants to speak about it or actually realize that it can happen to them. And it's not just, you know, getting released. It could be, you know, you get injury stricken and you're out for a year. All of a sudden the club doesn't want you. So, you know, it's having those conversations like with the Deco, the PFA, I know do support players in that respect. So it's almost educating yourself early and knowing that if you are going to get into a bit of like financial hardship, or, you know, having those people to talk to and knowing who it is that you can have close to you. So the PFA have the hardship fund, I think it is, speaking to your clubs, and yeah, you know, going to these kind of workshops, women in football things, finding out what it is that they can do, just networking and getting the next person who you can always have someone in communication with, I think is really important. So you're not just left on your own thinking, what am I going to do next?
Yeah, I think absolutely to that point. I just think, you know, always contact Women in Football. If, you know, even if we don't have the answer, we'll be able to try and find some resource to help you. But that, you know, our purpose is to be that support network. So I think, you know, we are here, whether it's Cassie, Lucy, Jane, myself, Lungi, any of the board members, do make sure you reach out to us. But sorry, Mayi, you wanted to come in.
I just wanted to really emphasize how important it is to really have access to financial literacy and have basic education and as young as possible, especially for women and girls. I find that this is fundamental, and more that education about, you know, how to manage your finances, how to, you know, what are the basic requirements of a contract, what is a fair contract for you, and how to have a financial secure future. This is really important. And also, in general, I think when you read the research, women underestimate, you know, the value of their money. And sometimes investment is not that you need to have millions, but little amount of money can go further. And, you know, I think we constantly have to think strategically about our finances to be independent. And I really would like to stress this. If this is, you know, players are listening to this, and whoever is working with players, it's so important to really give access to financial literacy for them, especially when they are so at risk on their contracts, when they are not earning the right amount of money, when they don't have full-time contracts. This is fundamental in their education.
Absolutely. We've got to leave it there. I didn't get round to half of the questions that are in the chat. I'm so sorry, but anything we can help with going forward, you know where we are. There's another webinar next week. Thank you so much, Mayi, Fern, Raf. I'm going to hand back to Lungi, who will wrap from Women in Football.
Thank you so much, Jo. And from Women in Football, thank you so much to our panelists, Mayi, Fern and Claire, for such an absorbing and fascinating conversation. Thank you to all the attendees for also joining us. I really particularly enjoyed the chat just around recognising our soft skills that go beyond obviously being an athlete, being a player. And I think we can all relate to that really when we're thinking about transitioning into potentially another career. I also really enjoyed just hearing about taking ownership really of our own development and being a little bit more open in the conversations that we had. So thank you so much. Panelists, just before you go, just want to say to the attendees, please do let us know on Twitter or email at events@womeninfootball.co.uk your thoughts on the webinar. But also we will be running a lot more of these over the next few weeks. So we'll see you then, and that information will be sent out to you shortly. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.